All right. Good morning, everyone. We will get started as people continue to trickle in. Um, my name is Christina Van Dixon. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a project manager at Environmental Initiative. Um, thank you for joining us this morning for our forum, Local Leadership, Local Action, a Climate Change Conversation. Today, today's event is being recorded and will be shared to attendees in the following week. To get us started, we would like to acknowledge that we are convening this space from Minnesota, the homeland of the Dakota people, and where Dakota and Anishinaabe people, as well as Indigenous people from other tribal nations, currently reside. We invite everyone to say hello in the chat with who you are, your LinkedIn handle, and where you're calling from, including the native land you're on. If you don't know, use the link that Rachel will put in the chat for you to look up the land that you're on. As people continue to say hello, I will orient everyone to our virtual space. We are using two platforms this morning, Crowdcast and GatherTown. Crowdcast is the platform we're currently using right now, and it closely mirrors a real-time event by highlighting our panelists. We invite you to engage with us in the chat today. After today's panel, everyone will have the opportunity to switch to GatherTown for some virtual networking to continue the conversation, talk with other attendees, ask additional questions to our panelists, and kind of network around. It's a virtual, old school game style where you can kind of walk around in our virtual conference space and meet new people, talk to folks you haven't talked to in a while. Hope you can join us later today. At Environmental Initiative, our mission is to catalyze collaboration across perspectives, power, and systems for social equity and environmental health, with a vision that relationships foster an inclusive, just, and thriving world for all beings. I'm going to share a short 30-second video from our board chair, Michelle Stockness, to share the value of working together for Environmental Initiative.
There's a lot of big environmental challenges we have to solve, and you have to trust somebody to bring you together, to work together, and I think that's what Environmental Initiative does as well. Organizations that maybe think they're not aligned can find ways they do have commonality and can be aligned to the same goals. We're really talking out loud about social justice and environmental justice and equity. I welcome the opportunity to have people get together and try to work together and compromise over differences, which isn't the typical norm these days.
We didn't know we wanted to.
If you're interested in hearing more from our staff, our partners, we have a few more short videos on our YouTube page that Rachel will add a link to in the chat. We are also trying to meet a $20,000 fundraising goal between now and the end of the year, and we have $8,000 left to go. All donations will be matched dollar for dollar by our current and past board of directors. Thank you to those who've contributed when you register for today's event. Every dollar helps and makes programming like this possible. You can learn more and support our work on our website. I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors for supporting today's event, specifically our presenting series sponsors, Dorsey & Whitney and Wink, and now part of Stantec, and our event sponsors, WSB, Excel Energy, and Great River Energy. Also, we wouldn't be able to have this event without our panelists, so thank you for being here today. If during the panel discussion you have a question, please add them to the chat or the question tab at the bottom of your screen, and my colleague Rachel will monitor those for the Q&A section towards the end of today's event. So to kick off our panel, I'd like to introduce two leaders in our community, Audrey Acorn and Jamez Staples, who will briefly tell us why it's important for local government to actively engage in the climate crisis, in addressing the climate crisis. Audrey is a senior at Central High School and serves as the chair of the Minnesota Youth Council. Gonna add our folks on here. Great. So Audrey Acorn is a senior at Central High School and serves as the chair of the Minnesota Youth Council Committee on Environmental Justice and a youth member of the Climate Justice Advisory Board. Jamez Staples is the president and CEO of the Renewable Energy Partners and our 2021 Environmental Initiative Innovation Award winner for his collaborative partnership on the Second Chance Community Solar Garden. So I will give it over to them.
So important is because of the local policies, right? Local policies are critical. I mean, the federal government can come with a top-down approach, acknowledging that they have resources as well as a lot of political pull. However, acknowledging the fact that there's the local piece, I mean, the state piece, and then there's the local piece, which ultimately have the most influence on our day-to-day lives. And so when these cities are setting, local governments are setting these policies, I think about here in Minneapolis, where I live, and I think about the fact that the city of Minneapolis has taken a very strong approach to addressing the issue of climate change. They announced the climate emergency back, I want to say, in 2018, and then back in, I want to say it was almost 6 years ago, that they started the Clean Energy Partnership, which is a partnership between the utilities and the city itself. So that's CenterPoint and Xcel Energy. And so the city, acknowledging that they have some power here in this conversation, because they have to sign franchise agreements with these utilities. They could do whatever they want. They could start their own utility if they choose to. However, under the threat of the potential of municipality ownership, the utilities decided to do something a little bit different and come into the partnership of the Clean Energy Partnership. And so with that, the city has been very aggressive about pushing, and so I serve on the Energy Vision Advisory Committee, which advises the Clean Energy Partnership, and that helps to create some sort of balance in terms of power versus the utility just being able to dictate and control and just do what they want to do. And so through that, we've gotten some things done that we've thought were important, which includes some of the work that Patrick Hanlon has led at the City of Minneapolis' Health Department, utilizing the Green Biz Cost Share, which is using funds from the franchise fee to help lower carbon emissions that will ultimately have a positive impact on lower income communities. And so the local governments can also incentivize local participation, local workforce participation from minority populations, as well as incentivize youth employment too. So the city, the local government level is very, very critical to how we address the issue of climate change. And I can also appreciate the fact that the city has really been a partner of mine, being a partner in our training center. They lease space here in the building with a specific focus of what it is that I have been pushing to get done. And that's make sure that there's access to the necessary training to make sure that local people can actively participate and people of color have access to get the necessary skill sets to participate in the emerging sectors of the economy. And so with that, I'll kind of put it in park and I'll pass it off to my colleague here.
Thank you, Jamez. As they said earlier, my name is Audrey. I am a senior at Central High School. And I wanted to start off today just by recognizing we're having this conversation sort of about how local community impacts policy and how we can do policy from a local level. And I just wanted to point out that yesterday we lost one of the best people in this space, a really big leader on really talking about how community and policy and change interact, and that's Bell Hooks. So just sort of grounding this conversation in the fact that some of the great leaders in this space has passed away yesterday. But looking at it from a really big level, looking at what Jamez says, is there's a lot of different ways that young people and local governments can interact in the ways that sort of we want to have a change on the issue of climate. as Jamez says, one of the big ones is workforce participation. We see young people, and specifically young students of color and low-income students, when they're given opportunities to be put into pathways into industries like the solar energy industry, when they're put into pathways like the renewable energy industry through their school systems, through their local government systems, that's a really big opportunity for them to create sort of good paying jobs, to help uplift their community. It's a really big circular impact when we're able to get young people participating in the workforce, get them good paying jobs. It's a way of not only sort of looking at the climate crisis, but looking at creating a more just society. It's looking at sort of impacting our economic systems. There's a lot of things we can do at the same time by sort of using young people and helping young people in many different ways. And that goes into a bigger conversation when we talk about people at a local government level. So oftentimes when we think about local government and looking at the people in this call and the people that typically occupy the spaces that they're working in, it's often older people, it's often white people, it's often older white men. And when we talk about an issue like climate change and we talk about an issue like climate justice, those are not the people that matter and the people that are supposed to be centered in those discussions. And I think one of the big things when thinking about it from a local government level is this idea of intergenerational justice, that there's a debt that is owed to the people that are being most impacted by the climate crisis by those that are not being impacted. And I think one of the big things that comes from thinking about intergenerational justice is doing proper community outreach and community engagement. If people that are in decision-making spaces, people that are working on these issues front hand, don't truly understand how those that are most impacted are sort of dealing with the issues of the climate crisis, there really is no way for us to truly get a gauge on what the solutions can be. And that involves going deep into the communities that are most impacted. That involves going into schools and talking with students because they're the ones that are going to have to deal with the consequences further. It involves going into community spaces in low-income communities. It involves engaging with already formed groups of people, groups in communities of color, groups in low-income communities. There are already lifting up community injustice, that are already lifting up solutions that help their community. And from there, seeing how we can take that information and go further. There's not enough really coordination right now between the work that happens on a youth level and the work that happens in vulnerable communities and what needs to happen on the local level in order to create change. So I'm really excited that we have some great speakers that sort of can talk more about how they're sort of looking at all these different issues and sort of looking at how we can impact young people and how young people can help guide change on a local level. And it'll be really great to hear more from the panelists when we get to them. And I think I pass that back to Christina.
Thank you. Jamaz, do you have anything else? Otherwise, I can move us along.
I'd just like to say, Adrian did a great job. And I think it's imperative that we really, really focus exactly where he pointed at, right? Getting young people the necessary skill sets to actively participate in the economy. When you think about, where youth employment is in the crisis that we're going through with poverty, and young people having children and their parents being young parents, they're not necessarily equipped with what's necessary to be successful in this world right now. So I think that the better job that we could do of getting them prepared, to actively participate in this economy of the clean energy economy, it just moves the dial faster, more expediently. And so that's all I really have to say. Great job.
Well, thank you both for getting us in the right mindset and the right space to get this event going. So what we'll do next is I will have Mike Harley join us, and he will be facilitating our main panel for today. Mike, I will add you on. And I'll pass it over to you, Mike.
Good morning. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Audrey, and thank you, Jamez. I am Mike Harley. I'm Executive Director at Environmental Initiative. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm going to moderate this panel today. We're excited, and I think we're fortunate to have three speakers who have experience in working with local and tribal governments on climate and energy initiatives. And we've asked them to talk with us about those experiences today, as a way for all of us in this conversation to get a little more deeply knowledgeable about and engaged with the work that's happening at that local level. And so we've got folks joining me. There we go. Okay. And I'm going to ask that as we get into this conversation, we've tried to set it up as a free-flowing conversation. And so we've invited our speakers to play off each other, to ask each other follow-up questions. So I've got some questions, but if the conversation gets rolling, I'm going to let them talk to each other. And I'll also invite that all of you who are with us today, feel free to pop questions that you have for our speakers into the chat. And as we go, we'll try to pull some of those questions out of the chat and share them. So that's our plan for today. I'm going to ask our speakers in alphabetical order by last name to introduce themselves. And so that'll be Bob Blake first, and then Kevin Bright, and then Dan Katzenberger, in case it's too early for us to quickly do the alphabetizing in our heads. And what I'm going to ask is that each speaker just take a few minutes to share your name, pronouns if you choose, where you call home, and then a few sentences about what you want everyone to know about your work at this point as we're starting the conversation. And we'll start with Bob.
Yeah, good morning. Ani Buju, everyone. Good morning. Got a little, my voice, trying to clear my voice. Had some emergency dental work done the other day, so I'm still recuperating from it. Yes, hi, my name is Robert Blake, and I am I'm a tribal citizen of the Red Lake Nation, but I do reside here in St. Paul. This is obviously Dakota traditional land. And my pronouns are he, him, is. And yeah, I guess just very happy to be here. The work, I guess, specifically that I focus on is more like, I suppose you could say, tribal country. But I did grow up in St. Paul, and very proud of Audrey for the great work he just did in talking about the city and whatnot. I serve on the Climate Justice Advisory Board with him, and also I went to St. Paul Central, so I graduated from St. Paul schools too. So very proud of seeing him do the work that he's doing in the community. Yeah, so that's mostly the work that I'm involved with, is mostly around the tribes, and obviously I do get asked to do some of the stuff here, the Twin Cities, and also trying to push the narrative around renewable energy on a federal level too. So I've been really lucky to be asked to join some of those conversations now by people from around the country, and so it's been really exciting and humbling to be a part of that. And I'll pass it off to the next person.
Oh, there you go, Kevin.
All right, cool.
There you go.
Thank you. Also, thanks for pointing out who was going first. I was rapidly trying to be like L's before R, so that would make Robert first. So I'm Kevin Bright. I'm the Energy and Sustainability Director for the Destination Medical Center project in the city of Rochester. Where I call home is Rochester, where I grew up, was just outside Boston, Massachusetts, in a small town called Sharon. But happy Minnesotan now at this point, and almost been here for 5 years. So the work that I do is, I guess, multifaceted and kind of a little bit different depending on the organization. But for the Destination Medical Center, there are some pretty ambitious greenhouse gas, energy reduction, waste reduction, water reduction goals for this district, this 1 square mile area of downtown Rochester, over a 20-year time period of the economic development project itself. So as we're adding 10 million square feet, a lot of these goals are meant to reduce our overall impact in this geographic region, this 1 square mile area downtown, as a way to help meet our climate, sustainability, and equity goals. So no small task there to reduce while adding a lot of new space. But we're making some good progress and excited to talk more about that too. And then on the city of Rochester, it's very similar to organizational leadership role for sustainability. where myself and my colleague Lauren Jensen are working to basically implement sustainability initiatives and embed them within the city operation itself across all departments, and then also trying to encourage others in our community to adopt those same behaviors and actions as a way to continue to help reduce our impact on the environment, as well as build those up in our community too. Capacity building approach around community co-design that I can talk more about, and excited to do so today. So thanks for having me.
Great. So I guess I'm next. So first of all, sound check. Can people hear me? Awesome. Got it right the first time. Thank you. So my name is Dan Katzenberger, calling in from Eden Prairie, Minnesota, from my basement. Go by pronouns he, him. Let's see. What was the next question on the list? Why am I here? So I am here primarily because I am serving my 5th year as a commissioner on Eden Prairie's Sustainability Commission. And as part of that work, I've also worked with many other sustainability commissions, both existing and forming throughout the Twin Cities. So I have quite a good view of what's going on in terms of what cities are doing in sustainability. I was also recently appointed as a board member of Sustainable Cities and Communities. And the purpose of that group is to bring together all of these city commissions, as well as coordinate now with the county commissions and the state efforts on climate change. So how do we get, first of all, every city in the state to have a climate action plan? How do we get every county in the state to have a climate action plan? And then how do we coordinate all of those climate action plans together so that we're working to the same purpose and we're helping each other where we can, we're sharing best practices and things like that. Other things I do on the side is I do have a full-time job. So I work at Best Buy on their sustainability team. So helping Best Buy to meet their climate action plan or climate goals. I also have my own company called Green Building Assessment Institute. And in that role, right now I'm working on 4 projects for tribes in northern Minnesota, where I'm helping them to lead certify their new hospitals or expansions and new hospitals and clinics to make those green and clean and energy efficient. One connection I have with environmental initiative is through my work at Best Buy, I serve on the Sustainable Growth Coalition. So it's a group that Environmental Initiative puts together, brings together all of the big stakeholders, big business stakeholders in the state. And so in addition to the government work that we're doing, as I mentioned, in cities, counties, and the state, and then grassroots level, we've also got corporations forming similar coalitions. And that's what this Sustainable Growth Coalition is doing, is how do we get corporations to share their best practices, to set goals, to help move policy forward, to help the state become climate friendly, basically. And with that, I will stop and turn it back over to Mike.
Thanks to all 3 of you, and appreciate the connection to the Sustainable Growth Coalition, Dan. That's something I want to certainly invite folks to learn more about. And maybe EI staff can pop a link to our website on that as well. And so we're going to dive into talking about the work that each of our 3 panelists are involved with. And again, I'm going to ask that if you have questions of each other, ask them, follow up, make this into a conversation. And as we were doing a little practice together, maybe it was last week, we just realized how much each one of these speakers could tell us about. And it's just not possible in a short time. So what we wanted to start by asking is for each of you to share one example of your work with tribal or local climate action that most inspires you or excites you. And so this is kind of a softball for you to talk about something that you're really jazzed to talk about. And whoever wants to start can start. But somebody should start. So polite. How about Kevin? Kevin's smiling. Everyone's smiling. Kevin, you willing to go first? When you unmute. There you go.
Am I unmuted? Yeah. Happy to go first. Okay. Thanks. One project I'm particularly excited about that we're working on and speaks to kind of the charge that Audrey shared with us kind of at the beginning of this event today, was an attempt and kind of a pilot approach that we've established here in Rochester and with the DMC project to broaden civic participation and representation in decision-making, especially public decision-making. So with a group of a steering committee of members from nonprofit, city government, county government, as well as organizations within the city. We created or piloted a program called Community CoDesign, where we're centering individuals most impacted by a program, a plan, or initiative in the development of that program, plan, or initiative from the outset. These are compensated positions. We pay consulting fees for these individuals to participate and share their lived experience in order to help shape the key components of the program that often are overlooked by people shaping those in the past that aren't experiencing or aren't living in those same circumstances, and as a result, aren't the best informed people in order to create a program to help solve for them. So over the past 2 years, we've piloted this on a park design project. It's been used to help improve food access programs within our food bank here locally, within our county system in Southeast Minnesota, and used it for a number of other projects. So we've piloted about 10 kind of purposely different things, design projects, programs, as well as plans, as a way to try to stress test this approach. And thus far, it's gone really well. So the exciting part for us is our DMC leadership, which is a public board, some set by the city of Rochester, some set by the governor and the state of Minnesota, decided to operationalize this engagement approach and just say, this is how we're going to do things moving forward. So we're staffing up and just tentatively are hiring someone to help us accomplish exactly that. And at the same time, our city teammates who we kind of work very closely with on a daily and weekly basis are also interested in using this approach on an ongoing basis, which is really exciting. So it's starting to take off to a degree that I don't think we expected. But the exciting part is that we're making space and empowering historically excluded voices to help us design better solutions and create a better community. And I don't want to give the sense that we figured all of this out. That's not what I'm trying to say, but I think we found an approach that's resonating with the community and is making some pretty impactful changes to the way that we're making decisions and designing things for the better of Rochester. So happy to talk more about that, but I'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate the human dimension of this conversation being in the forefront. So thank you. And yes, none of us are perfect. We're all working on it. Thanks. Dan or Bob?
Yeah. I think about kind of the stuff that I've worked on here, and great question, Mike. I'm really proud of the Returning Citizens Initiative that we did with the Department of Corrections, and that program is no longer going on. Actually, it got cut half in the time frame that it was supposed to, because the Department of Corrections decided to close down the Willow River and Toga Institute due to budget constraints. But I believe the last count was, I think there was like 120. There was like 120 former or people that were incarcerated that went through the training program up there, and they're due to legal. I can't track these guys. You know what I mean? But I do stay in touch with 3 of them, and they're still working in the solar industry, and they're making a living. And they call me, we talk, and one of them has got one of them just got married, and another one he's got his family, he's got his kids, and it's all due because he said it's because of his involvement working in the solar industry. And to me, that's what the idea was about in putting together that training program up there, was, to fight mass incarceration with climate change, to fight climate change or mass incarceration. And the last state that I spoke to, and I spoke to about 7 of them, that wanted to get this training program implemented into their correctional facilities, was the state of New York. So I haven't followed up with these other states that have talked to me about this because I'm just busy. There's only so much time in the day, but I hope that it's proven to be a success for them too. And Levi, one of the participants, was in a national article, and he talked about the program and what it meant for his life. And so, I mean, that to me has just been really fulfilling. I think that's why I got into this work. And to this date, I got to say, I mean, the difference that I just made in Levi's life, I guess, he says it, to me has just been rewarding and makes all this work that we do worth it and worthwhile. So yeah, but I hope that we could bring back another training program to the Department of Corrections, where we are training inmates again on renewable energy, on maybe energy efficiency work, on these jobs that are going to be very prevalent as they exit those facilities. So yeah, so that's what I would say would be my. I'm very proud of that work.
Such a beautiful story. Thank you. And for those of you who are here and listening, if you're interested in helping Bob bring that program back, you know how to reach him. And then Dan.
Yeah, so I think one of the things I'm most interested in or most proud of in Eden Prairie. So, we set our climate action plan. We set all these kind of high-minded goals, right? But we're not just setting them for the city, we're setting them for all the residents and all the businesses within our city, right? And even people that pass through our city, like how do we make our transportation better? How do we let people, just driving through, get through more efficiently and things like that. But one thing that I'm most proud of is we've got this new program where we're doing a community solar project on our community center. And part of this project has a carve out for multifamily and low income housing, because those are folks that are very hard to get involved in the sustainability conversation, right? They typically don't own their heating and ventilation systems. They can't change their insulation. They can potentially buy clean energy. You can buy clean energy through the local utility, but there's a cost premium for doing that. It costs more money to buy clean energy. And so if you're already spending a disproportionate amount of your income on energy, to spend more to have it be clean is just not fair. So we've got this program, this first community solar project we're putting on our community center. It's sized for about 100 to 150 families, depending on who actually ends up signing up. Now, the interesting part about this is we've had well over 300 families sign up. So we've over double subscribed the program, which shows, one, that there's an interest in this and people helping to participate in clean energy in the community. And two, that we need to figure out a way to expand this program so that we can open it up to more people. The roof of the community center is only so big. We've already got solar on our schools. Our worship communities in Eden Prairie have done their own community solar projects for their congregations. So how are we going to expand this program? And then the next phase is going to be, we have an old landfill that's closed, it's covered, and it's bare land. It'd be facing south. It'd be a great place to put solar panels. And then so as we get farther on into this conversation, one of the issues is going to be what kind of roadblocks might we be facing in terms of doing some of these things. And so that's one of those situations where it's a large piece of land. It's perfect for putting on solar, but there are, policy, just different issues that may be involved in expanding that out so that we can get more people in Eden Prairie's community to be able to subscribe to these clean energy programs. So very proud of where we're at so far, but we still got some ways to go.
Thanks, Dan. Any of the speakers have a follow-up or something that was prompted for you, or what you heard from one of your fellow panelists?
Yeah. Hey, I would like, Dan, I would like to, so I was just in the Indian Health Services building in Red Lake 2 days ago now. Like I said, I had some dental work done, exercising my treaty rights, everyone. but that was a joke. But they are doing incredible work there at the hospital. It actually looks beautiful, by the way. But I do see a lot of work being happening. And I actually thought of you. I was like, hey, this is the guy I'm going to be on the panel with, and he's doing this work here for the IHS facility. How is that? How did that all come to be, and like, how did that happen? Because that's exciting to get, especially. And here's a little note for everybody. I used to work for the USDA. The biggest building owner in the country is the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So we're talking about the one group of government agencies that need to do the most work around energy efficiency is the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So I think that was great, Dan, that you're doing this work with them. But how did that all come to be, and how's it been so far working with them?
Yeah, so first of all, working with them has been exceptional. It's been great. I am working on the Red Lake project, so that's kind of earlier in the phase, the expansion and the renovation work they're doing there. We're kind of just starting the multitude of projects that are going to be going on there. Excuse me, how it happened is a long story, and I'm not going to drag into the whole long story. But at one point in my career, I worked for an NGO called U.S. Green Building Council. And so U.S. Green Building Council, they administer the LEED, which is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design program for buildings. So IHS has programs in place that they require buildings, depending on how big and the budget and things like that, to meet certain levels of LEED certification. So since I worked for U.S. Green Building Council, I had certified over 1,000 buildings in my time there. I was working for a company that out of Grand Rapids that was doing work for IHS in Minnesota, right? When I left that company, then the people at IHS and the people at the tribes basically contacted me, and the architects and engineers working for those tribes contacted me and said, you know, we're doing these LEED projects. You seem to know what you're doing. Can you help us out on these projects? So that's kind of how it started. I didn't even have a business at the time. You know, I was just starting to do kind of the day job kind of thing. And so I started a business, and that's at Green Building Assessment Institute. And the whole purpose of that is to support the tribes in northern Minnesota in doing these buildings. So I've got 4 projects going on at those buildings right now, and I've got a 5th one now under negotiation and see if that one comes to fruition or not. But yeah, the work they're doing is great. The work that, you know, the EV charging, I'm really excited about the EV charging infrastructure that is going to be going on up there, right? Because that's part of LEED. If we can put in, you know, low emission vehicle parking, that's a LEED point. If we have EV chargers, that's potentially a LEED point. So there's really good work. There's really good coordination between all of these organizations and helping each other to meet the goals. You know, I do a lot of work. The other one's White Earth Health Center, and they've got a huge wind turbine right there on the site, which is really cool. So we're trying to figure out how can we you know, maximize the use of that wind turbine for the facilities that we're building these you know, green expansions and green renovations and all of that. So yeah, it's a great tie-in. It wasn't on purpose. It just kind of happened, but it's you know, part of my favorite part of every day is being able to work on these projects.
Well, I think it's a great opportunity that we're all just sitting on this environmental initiative board. We're talking about this because I need to get with you and talk with you more, because you definitely get those charging stations that you need for your project. Okay, that is you. I'm being recorded, right, Mike? I'm being recorded. Okay, you get those charging stations. Second thing, we've been talking to White Earth and how we're going to get them their charging stations. So we definitely should have to do some coordinating after the call. Definitely, Dan. So great. Thank you for all the work. And the people up in Red Lake are very excited about everything that we're doing. And it's just going to get it's starting to pick up some real good steam now too. So very exciting for all that work. So we'll go to the next question, I guess. Right?
I think so. Yes. Thank you for co-moderating. This is excellent. Getting a lot of good feedback that people are appreciating the conversation between the 3 of you. So just keep doing that. We wanted to ask each of you to just state what local or tribal governments that you are currently working with. And I know some of you have done that already, but just reiterate that. And then share what you can about the climate related goals that have been adopted by that government, just to give us a sense of where where people are setting the bar and what they're aiming to do.
Well, I guess I'll start because I've gone last, I think, every time. So don't want to look like the laggard. So I mean, as I mentioned, so I've been on the Eden Prairie, it was Conservation Commission, now Sustainability Commission for 5 years. The first thing we did was the Partners in Energy program. So that's what most commissions do, because there's funding, there's support from the local utilities that help us develop an environmental program. But that very quickly then rolls into the climate action plan, right? So we did do our climate action plan. We do have a goal to be carbon neutral by 2050. And I pushed really, really hard, and I'm going to continue to push really, really hard to get that to 2040 if I can, and also have a 50% by 2030 goal. But our goal right now is carbon neutral by 2050, and it's still an aggressive goal for a city, especially considering that most of our stakeholders, we don't control people, we don't control their homes, we don't control businesses, buildings, we don't control the transportation system per se, we don't control where gas stations are. They're gas stations and things like that. So where we're at is carbon neutral by 2030, and now where we're at is building out the strategy, right? So how do we get there? How do we get people to start considering installing heat pump systems instead of natural gas heaters? So when their furnace goes out in their home, it's typically an emergency situation. It's minus 20 degrees outside. I need a furnace now, and so the contractor has one on the shelf and he brings it in and he installs it. And now you've got a gas furnace that's going to be burning natural gas for the next 10 to 20 years. How do we get ahead of that curve and say, look, we need ground source or air source heat pumps to be able to do these things? Same thing with water heating, same thing in the kitchen. So anyway, that's our goals, and now we're working on that strategy to how do we build out those goals. So I'll just stop there.
Yeah. So I was just going around to the in the screen here. Yeah. So so I'm a member of the Climate Justice Advisory Board for the City of St. Paul with Audrey. And obviously, we're making our recommendations to the mayor and his staff, and then obviously to the city council. I think we've got some good things in the pipeline and what we're rolling with, working with Russ Stark over here. So, he's an incredible guy. And then on a workforce side, Ramsey County, I'm on the Ramsey County Workforce Innovation Board. And so we've been really kind of starting to push, we've been working on this idea for about the last, I'd say, year now, I think, around just green jobs and whatnot, and getting some training for people over here on the east side, working with the East Side Connection, East Side Employment Connection. East Side Employment Connection. So that's been happening, and we just had a green jobs webinar. It was a couple weeks ago, I think it was. And we had all the links there for everyone to sign up and get involved. So that's pretty exciting. And then, I guess on a tribal level, I've been working with Red Lake, been getting bombarded by so many different tribes now, and even across the country. So just trying to, organize all that. And that's been really exciting. And then on a state level, working with the Governor's Workforce Development Board, we're currently putting together kind of a green job kind of committee that will be tackling this stuff. So I'm also being a part of that too. So all that work has been really exciting. But I know this isn't about jobs and green jobs, but big thing yesterday, we had our final workforce development board meeting for the state. And I've just been seeing a lot of people through my Facebook feed timeline talk about childcare and elder care. And that's something that we really got to tackle, everyone, is childcare and elder care if we're going to get these green jobs going and everything else that we want to do. And that is in the Build Back Better bill. So there's great money in there for that, and we need to support that. So I'll pass it on to the next guy.
I'll just say quickly too, I appreciate that so much of this conversation is about meeting human needs and economic development and solving our climate crisis. And that was one of the reasons why we wanted to have Jemez help frame the conversation for us, because that, of course, is his work too. So, Kevin.
Cool. Yeah, sorry, a little delay as I unmute, but yeah, the city of Rochester and DMC have kind of overlapping and complementary sustainability and resource reduction goals. The biggest ones are they align with the Next Gen Energy Act that was passed by the state. So we have an 80% reduction that we're shooting for by 2050, and then a 30% reduction by 2025. Interestingly, as of last year in 2020, we were basically, because a lot less people were driving, we were on track where we met our 30% reduction last year with the reduced travel through transit and transportation vehicle miles traveled. So we've seen beyond a 30% reduction since 2007, which is exciting, but also points to the fact that we still have a lot more work to do, obviously. An acknowledgement too that those goals are contained within our energy action plan, and kind of to what Dan was alluding to too, and others was very focused on the environmental performance goals that we were trying to hit, but didn't bring into the conversation the human element or who has access to these programs and will benefit from them. So over the past 2 years, we've been working with a sustainability and resiliency task force, a 45-person community team, to come up with a sustainability and resiliency community action plan that's grounded in social equity and racial equity, and kind of adds another layer of implementation as how to actually get to those goals, while also keeping equity at the forefront of the decision making and the programs and initiatives that are contained within there. So we're excited to start to activate that work this year. And I just kind of wanted to throw a moniker that I keep in my head, I guess, as it relates to the co-design, but also the sustainability work. A sustainability colleague from Philadelphia at a training with the Urban Sustainability Directors Network said, if equity isn't at the forefront and racial equity at the forefront of our work, what are we sustaining? And I think that might be a good frame of mind to keep for this. I mean, this panel keeps coming up with every speaker, but also for the folks on the call, I think that's helped me. And in my work, kind of a question that I keep repeating to myself multiple times a day of like, the easy thing to do typically is not the right thing to do. And if we don't do it, what are we sustaining? So thanks.
Yeah. I'd like to follow up just on some of the comments, right? So one of the comments was about jobs, right? And I think probably most of the people on this call think we should be doing climate action because it's the right thing to do, right? We want our children to be able to live in a world that's not on fire. So, I mean, I think there's that kind of mindset, but there's also the mindset of this is good for the economy and this is good for jobs, right? And a lot of these jobs are local. Putting in EV chargers is something that we are going to need local people, local electricians to do. Putting in solar systems is something we need local installers, local electricians to do. We've got a bus company that makes electric buses. We've got a new truck company that's making electric trucks. It's getting very good traction. They're getting their Series A and Series B funding in place so that they can expand like the ones we hear about, like Tesla and Rivian and all those. But we've got one of those in Minnesota that's making big trucks that can do fire trucks and they can do, waste vehicles and these bigger uses. And so I really, and the other thing I didn't mention, so I mentioned all the kind of, environmental groups that I'm in when I did my introduction. Another group I attend meetings often is the Chamber of Commerce, right? So the Chamber of Commerce has a different mindset than Minnesota Sustainable Growth Coalition in some ways. But in other ways, they don't. It's the same. It's like, how do we have sustainable growth? We want to have these jobs come to Minnesota, right? We want to have the economic development as part of the transition to renewable energy. The difference is, do we do it with carrots or do we do it with sticks? And so if you're talking to people that aren't doing this just for the environmental reasons, you want to lead with carrots. You want to say, okay, here's the good things that come out of these programs. And I really think that's an important part of the conversation because, everybody, no matter where you fall on the political spectrum, everybody wants to have a clean air and clean water. Everybody wants to have equitable society, right? We all want people to be educated. We all want people to be able to be successful in their lives. I mean, there's no one in any political spectrum that is against any of these things. It's just how we talk about them and where do we emphasize the conversation, I think. And so I think that's just important. When we bring up jobs, it's good to talk about jobs because people in rural Minnesota love jobs. People in rural Minnesota love the income they might get from a solar or wind farm on their property while they're still able to do some, what they want to do with their property as well. So I think it's important to keep that in the conversation.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, and I just want to say too, and add to this, just something I didn't mention before was, as I do work with these tribes, and I didn't mention this when I was talking before, but, I got to say, man, all the work that I've done here in the Twin Cities with all of our different groups and whatnot, I mean, I've taken that knowledge and implement and like working on that and putting that into tribes communities, right? So like, even when I do talk to a tribe, like, and they do call me and we do talk about like, hey, what, Bob, we'd love for you to come consult with us and start, planning out our energy plans and whatnot. Immediately I tell them, like, let's start out with an EVAC committee. Let's start out with an energy vision advisory committee. Like, let's start out with like bringing the community in so they have buy-in into this project, because the more buy-in we have from the community, the more successful this thing is going to be, And so and I got that from being on the EVAC committee in Minneapolis, you know what I mean? And as I go through like these kind of the CJAP stuff, I mean, I'm taking those things and I'm trying to apply them out into the tribal communities. So that I just wanted to mention that's really exciting, that I can straddle between these two worlds, so to speak, and get those things kind of moving. So I just wanted to bring that up.
I'll just follow up with a quick question, which is off script for a minute, which is, are there places that any of you connect with peers or with others that are doing this work, networks that you advise people to get connected to, organizations, etc., just so we can learn from each other the way you're talking about, Bob?
Yeah. So I'm actually also, I'm also on another committee. I'm also on another thing. I'm also with a group out of northern Arizona. I'm forgetting the acronym right now because I'm thinking about so many different acronyms right now. But they are a national Native American kind of environmental group, and we talk about so many different things around not only renewable energy, right, but we also talk about energy efficiency, adaptation, mitigation strategies. And we're trying to bring this message all to all the tribes and working with them. And it was so funny because one day they were talking and someone from a tribe out in Florida had said, hey, can we get that? I want to hear that solar bear guy again from Minnesota. I want to hear him talk again. So, but it's really been a great networking opportunity to work with all these tribes across the country and to really tell them what, and just kind of give them your ideas, right? Because I think what we're doing in Minnesota is really, really, really innovating. With the community solar gardens, with the stuff we're doing around energy efficiency, the EVAC committees, the CJAP committees. I mean, I think, we're doing some good stuff here. And so it's really exciting to hear from the other people around the country and how they're like, yeah, we'd like to do that. We would like to thank you. Let's start, planting those seeds in our community.
I could plan a few more too. Mine are going to be a little bit more focused on kind of the DMC work that I do on a daily basis, but the United States Green Building Council, Dan already mentioned that, but that's a good chapter and network to get looped in with. Kind of national organizations that share a lot of webinars and kind of best practices. Eco districts would be one to connect with if you haven't. Next City is a newsletter that kind of talks about a lot of equitable development kind of topics within cities and downtowns. The Urban Sustainability Directors Network is another, so cities can sign up for that, as well as tribal organizations, I believe. So if that's of interest, and it's really just every sustainability director in the country meets and talks about what their work is, and there's, as you can imagine, a lot of overlap among us. CERTS is another one if folks haven't connected with the community energy resource teams regionally. And then another newsletter would be and conference would be the Congress of New Urbanism. And there's quite a bit of overlap between building dense spaces that are vibrant in downtowns and a lot of kind of sustainability approaches. associated with that, along with equity too. So all good ones. Hopefully it wasn't too many.
Yeah, and my problem is there's so many that it's how do you figure out which ones to mention, because I'm literally in Zoom calls, 4 or 5, 6 nights a week on some of these, and now starting to meet in person again. I'm just going to throw out a few. So Twin Cities Eco Rotary Club. So if you're interested in doing things out in the world, going out and pulling non-invasive species, or doing things in lakes, or cleaning up real areas for people, I mean, they're a good group to connect with. It's a smaller group, but they're very active in doing physical work in the environment, which is great. There are net impact chapters around, so if you can get involved in a net impact, that's a good way, because those are groups of people that determine their own kind of agenda. So collectively, it's like a grassroots kind of a thing. There's a national support group as well, but the local groups are very active. Climate Reality Leadership Corps. So this is it gets political when you say who owns it, but it's Al Gore's kind of thing that he started, right? But it's where they teach climate activism, and how do you one, understand climate change, and two, how do you act on that understanding. But in terms of community, Minnesota has great Climate Reality Leadership Corps chapters. So if you just type, Google Climate Reality Corps Minnesota chapter, you'll find that. You don't have to be trained necessarily to be a part of that chapter, but the training is free if you decide to do that. Again, I give a plug for environmental initiatives. So, I mean, if you just follow Environmental Initiative, give them money, sign up to their email list, attend all these events. And then I wouldn't call it a competitor, but it's a support organization that does similar things. So Fresh Energy is also a group in town that does a lot of good advocacy work in the thing. And then one I want to mention that's completely not related to sustainability per se, but it's related to this conversation, and it's a new grassroots NGO, and it's called Braver Angels. And what Braver Angels is, it's a way to get what they call reds and greens together that have very difficult conversations. So just about a month or two ago, they did a conversation with reds and greens, reds and blues. I'm sorry, I said greens. Reds and blues, right? Talking about climate change. They talk about other things. They talk about abortion. They talk about gun control. They talk about these complicated issues that are so divisive in the United States, and they teach people how to have civil conversations around these things. So I think it's one of those things, if you decide to join, it's like $10 or $12 a year. You don't have to pay money if you don't want. You can just go to the meetings, right? You can just watch. You don't have to participate, but if you're interested, you can give a 3-minute speech, and then other people can kind of have rebuttals and learn how to have these difficult conversations in a way that's beneficial for both people. You're not trying to change anyone. You're trying to learn. You're trying to become a better person yourself so that you can do better things for the community. I mean, that's all why we're here, right? We want the community to be better. And so it's kind of an odd plug to do a thing like this, but it's something I've been involved with quite extensively for the past few months. As I went through the University of Minnesota, Hubert H. Humphrey Policy Fellows Program, and that was a big change in my mindset about how do we have these conversations, because climate change is big. Energy transformation is big. This is not something that's only going to be done at a grassroots level. We need to have everyone in power on board and looking in the, steering the ship in the same direction. And these are just ways to help have that happen in a mutually beneficial way, and not necessarily always in a confrontational way.
That was a fire hose of wonderfulness that you opened up on us. So thank you. And thank you, Rachel, who's going to go back and listen to the recording and try to get all of that and share it with everybody. So if the people listening didn't catch it all, no problem. We're going to try to help you make those connections. Thank you. So this is a policy forum, and we want to talk a little bit about barriers that you face, or that local governments you're working with face, and how state policy could help address those barriers. And if you want to weave in how the private sector and community leadership can help as well, or other levels of government, that's fine too. But we really want to have you think a little bit about that state policy interface. Who would like to start with that?
All right, thought I heard someone come off, but yeah, I can hop in. It got mentioned in the chat a little bit, but I really want to underscore the importance of the Ego Act. One thing that I've been we've been struggling with here in Rochester for a number of years was this concept of fuel switching. And it was really impacting the adoption of heat pumps within residential homes and commercial buildings. So I'm hopeful for that act and what it can do for our communities across the state. With just a little bit of background, I moved here from Maine. So 4 years ago in 2017, I would probably say 1 out of every 5 homeowner that I knew had heat pumps. And it was because the utility themselves were providing pretty robust incentives in order to encourage that to happen. There's a lot more delivered fuel kind of in the area of Maine that I was, and I know there's also areas of Minnesota that have that same challenge. But I'm excited for kind of the next steps of that policy once it gets enacted. I think one policy or kind of approach that will be helpful, and I'm hopeful it's kind of addressed in these policies too, is something Dan mentioned, but low interest capital or funding programs to help people electrify their homes. We're already kind of experiencing a cost barrier here in Rochester for folks to upgrade their electrical service or electrical panels in an area of their home where it's out of code now. So to touch it, you need to pay that additional cost in order to get your home ready. And that's not something everyone has the means to do. And in fact, in some cases, it's over $10,000 to kind of make those changes to one's home in order to prepare oneself to allow for a heat pump in their home. So I think that's something that we need to put our collective heads together and not just rely on the state in order to do this, but municipalities, lending partners, banking institutions, and cities in order to help kind of crack that nut in order to kind of open up the door more and make this a possibility for more people living in the state. But I'll stop there.
I don't want to go with mine just yet, but I do want to follow up on the conversation about the financing. And I think one thing that's would be great for Minnesota to have, and there's been talk about us having it. I think there might be some money in it in the Build Back Better plan. I'm not sure exactly where that's going to fall, but the idea of a green bank, right? So you get a state level green bank. And what a green bank is, it's a bank that lends money to businesses and residences, and even can be cities or whatever, to help bring down those costs. So it's low income money. But the reason what they can do that commercial banks can't do is they can make these small kind of micro loans to help one person do a HVAC upgrade. So instead of having the gas furnace, they're going to have a heat pump kind of a thing. And what they do is they do 1,000 of these or 10,000 of these loans, and then they package those loans together, and then they sell those loans to a commercial bank, because now all the risk it's been de-risked. There's no risk in that loan anymore because just because of the way the programs work, similar to the way mortgage companies work, right? So you assemble a bunch of mortgages and you sell them. So you get all these loans, and then you sell those loans, and then that capital comes back into the green bank, and now you've got all that capital to do another type of program. So I really think the finance, cities can do a little bit. Cities can sometimes allocate a little bit of money to help things. One thing Eden Prairie does, and I know Edina did it last year, was just a small rebate for doing home energy squad visits, right? So that's one of these programs. It's in the Twin Cities. If you're in, and someone can correct me, I know we've got Nick from XL here. If it's in XL's territory or if it's in Centerpoint Energy's territory, you can do this thing called home energy squad visit, where these folks come out to your home and they do a kind of a energy audit of your home, figure out where you can make improvements. They actually make some of the improvements themselves. These home energy squad folks might wrap your water heater. They might do an air test, and if you have leaks in your doors and windows, they might help seal your doors and windows. If you have old incandescent light bulbs, they might change those to LED light bulbs. Low flow shower heads, things like that, right? Those are small things cities can do for the finance. But bigger, I think we do need this green bank, or we need some form of way to get capital, especially to low income folks, right? Because that's where the challenge is, that the large commercial banks can't do a $500,000 loan to someone that lives in an apartment that may only be in that apartment 5 years or something like that. I don't know what the details of the situation are, but a green bank can make those loans because they have a different mission. They have a different return rate that they need to meet, and then once they get that made, then they can sell those loans on and have this great revolving fund of goodness. So I'll stop there and see where the conversation goes.
Yeah, I think Nick just dropped out, but he's absolutely, he'd be the guy to talk to you about that around the Energy Squad stuff. But and as far as the Green Bank, Dan, is concerned, I remember the McKnight Foundation, doing some type of backgrounding on that, and I want to say, everyone, this was probably a couple of years ago. I want to say I did this interview, but we were talking about getting a green bank, and having somehow that happen here in Minnesota, or they were doing some research or some backgrounding on it, and I used to do lending myself, so I worked for a bank, did all that stuff, and so the information that I got was from Germany, was looking at Germany's kind of their model and whatnot, but I do believe it was McKnight Foundation that was doing the background for a possible green bank here in Minnesota. And I don't know where that's at right now, everyone, but I just know that was happening.
So going on to the next thing, so we wanted to talk about other kind of legislation barriers or roadblocks that we might be wanting to address. And so I just wrote down a few that specifically for Eden Prairie, but these apply more generally, I think. So one is state energy efficiency codes, right? So Minnesota lags behind the country in improving our state energy efficiency codes to the most, the most, I'll call them the aggressive, the most foremost energy efficiency codes. And there's lots of reasons for that. There's lots of politics behind why that happens. But the thing is that cities cannot adopt their own energy efficiency code. They have to meet the state energy efficiency code. And the state energy efficiency code, and this is my opinion talking, is not as it should be more on the forefront, similar to what more progressive states are doing in this area, right? So I think that's a big challenge, is how do we have these conversations around energy efficiency and the codes that we just set as the baseline that everyone needs to meet, because once you set those codes, then we're going to lower our carbon footprint simply because of that. A couple other things is the whole idea of doing renewable energy. So if it's individual, a company, or a city wants to do their own renewable energy, so Minnesota is a regulated state, and I'm not suggesting we change that, but there are barriers both in we could have that debate, but probably not on this call. We can. There are limits to transmission, right? There are limits to how we can connect to the grid, to how fast grid connections are able to be approved, right? And this is both through utilities, this is both through the PUC, this is through MISO, through all the organizations that control our electric grid and kind of determine how it's growing and how fast it's growing. We need to be growing our renewable energy much faster than we're growing it. I mean, that's just a statement of what I consider to be fact. And again, that's arguable, but how do we address this thing about transmission? Because there's all these people involved. There's people trying to push for greater transmission, but there's also people pushing to not grow the transmission, right? And there's reasons, even the environmentalists, there's some environmentalists that don't want to grow transmission. So it's a conversation I think we really need, everybody needs to be involved in, so that we can figure out how to get over that barrier. And I have a few other things, but I'll stop there because I think those are two big issues.
Yeah, I'd like to address Dan's question about the transmission lines. There was the Minnesota Power had to run transmission line from down in Manitoba, where they're carrying a lot of hydro back into Minnesota. And their transmission line had to go through, which would be our ceded territory lands of the Red Lake Nation. And if Minnesota Power was to bring that power line around our ceded territory, that would have cost them millions of dollars to do so. So, that's why I appeal to our state people that are listening, that work for the state of Minnesota right now, that are listening to this group here, that we need to get more. We need to have some type of energy advisory board from the state of Minnesota, working with tribes, having a real government to government relationship, following Governor Walz's 1924 act of more consultation between nation to nation, because this is what's going to be happening, folks. Red Lake allowed Minnesota Power to do this, but Red Lake could have been jerks about it. You know what I mean? and that power would have just taken that much longer to get here to Minnesota, and Minnesota Power couldn't be claiming we've got 50% renewable energy coming into the state of Minnesota. So to Dan's point here, there has to be some type of some type of collaboration, some type of consultation, working amongst tribes, because a lot of our ceded territory, or a lot of our lands people are out in these areas that you don't think about, but we still have claim to those properties. And it's like if you can imagine a big checkerboard, right? That's what it looks like. And they're about 40 parcel acres is what they are. And so I would like to see something like that happen. Not only that though, but as I deal with the co-op myself up there in Red Lake, I would like to see some oversight from the state. So that's why I would like to have like an energy kind of advisory board from the state happening. As I understand it, people, I think that is in the works. And that was, I think, implemented by Representative Jamie Becker-Finn, who put that together. And there's a House file on that too. So I'm hoping all that gets done. But to Dan's point, transmission is going to be very important if we're going to put a lot of renewable energy on our lines.
We have just a few. Oh, go ahead, Kevin. Kevin, go. No, go.
All right. A slightly different topic, but a portion of my job focuses a lot on the housing crisis and need for housing. So there's some policy within the state of Minnesota that kind of limits or doesn't really help share the risk for the development of condo development, or kind of these opportunities for less expensive housing as a way to build generational wealth. And I think overall, in terms of the development lens being brought to this conversation a little bit, we could use some really kind of unique and new models being brought to Minnesota so that folks can start to afford homes and have a pathway to afford homes. So like rent to ownership or other models that are what other states have done too, that would be applicable here and probably very useful. But I'll cut it off there. No, I'm sure.
I just want to follow up on that too. It looks
Keep going.
There's a big conversation. Everybody wants to communicate. So Eden Prairie has this conversation too, right? So we've got new developments going in, and the two things want to happen. We want to have kind of carve outs for low income housing so that people can afford to live in Eden Prairie. But we also want the buildings to be as green, clean, energy efficient as possible, right? There's limits to what we can do as a community, right? In terms of, we can't set the energy efficiency standards. That's one of the things I mentioned. We can, in some cases, do a carve out for low income housing. I had a conversation I went to an alumni group a few weeks ago, and I had a conversation with the big developers in town. And I asked them this question. I'm like, look, communities want to have low income housing, and we also want to have clean and green and energy efficient buildings. And I said, how can you help us as communities to help you have the resources you need to do that? And the conversation went to, if you want low income housing, then there's limits to what they can do on the clean energy side of things, right? Because there's cost associated with doing that. They said, if you want clean, green buildings, we can do that, but we're going to be building, 2,000 square, they didn't say the number, but, large units that can support, that are more expensive, that can support those kind of clean and green energy efficiencies. So I do think it's a conversation we need to have. And I think the developers are willing to have it. The cities are for certain willing to have it. We want to have those conversations. We don't want to necessarily, I say we, I'm not a legislator, I'm a commission member. But we don't want to have to make laws to make people do things that are not economical, right? Or that are not beneficial. And I think we do need more collaboration between the developers and the cities that work collaboratively. How do we get to these, how do we get equity and diversity and inclusion and sustainability and just great improvements to the community? How do we get all that built in a way that's beneficial for all the stakeholders?
And I just want to add to that, Dan and Kevin, let's get the people involved. All right, you've seen what we did in St. Paul here when we passed the rent, when we passed the rent increase, right? I mean, let's get the people involved. And when I was running for city council, I explained to a housing forum that we need to get a handle on private equity coming into our communities and buying up our single family homes and raising the prices of these homes and pricing out families in the community. So, so let me tell you something. Government can do something. They can put this on the ballot, let the voters vote on it, and then we can make changes. All right. So if the government doesn't have the guts to do it, the local government has the guts to do it, or the developers don't have the guts to do it, then let the people decide. And that's where I lie on it. And I actually suggested that because when I was working in the real estate industry, I was going to closings. There was nobody across the closing table from me. There was nobody there. It was just someone signing electronically from New York. We can't have that, people. We can't have that happening here in the state of Minnesota, because that's going to crush our housing system. We saw what happened back in the housing crisis. They nearly collapsed this country's economy. We can't let this happen again.
Thank you, Bob, and thanks to all three of you. I was going to ask you to reflect on a lesson learned from your experience in community. We don't have any time, but I can ask you for a 1 to 3 word kind of closing. Just something that's landing for you, something you want people to take away. So if you could do that, then we'll wrap up and move on to the gather town. Dan, you ready to go?
Yeah, I'm ready to go. And I think the word is collaboration. I think the one thing we learn is that we need to do this. It's not one person, it's not one group, it's collaborating. And it's getting all the voices at the table, not just the folks that are here, but everybody, every income level, every race, every gender, everything at the table will collaborate on these issues.
Might just build off that a little bit and say, seek new voices for that collaboration too.
Communication, cooperation, collaboration.
And to that, I will only add community. I appreciate this community we've created here today. And I'm going to turn this back to Christina, and she's going to tell you about how we can continue the conversation in Gather Town. Thank you to our speakers.